For the next few minutes, I'd like you to do something. Just notice where your mind goes while you listen. Not because you're trying to agree or disagree with anything that's said here, but because sometimes a thought lands differently depending on where we meet it from. You might hear something that reminds you of a person or a moment. This is simply an opportunity to look at something together for a few minutes and see what shows up. There's something I've started to notice recently about the way we deal with people. Sometimes we have a not so great interaction with someone. Maybe a conversation doesn't go well. Maybe something gets said the wrong way. Or maybe the moment just feels off. And without realizing it, we let that moment become the definition of the person. That single interaction becomes a reference point we carry forward. The next time we think about them, we're not thinking about the person anymore. We're thinking about the moment. And what's interesting is how quickly that happens. It doesn't take a long history. It doesn't take years of experience with someone. Sometimes it takes one moment, one conversation, one disagreement, one strange interaction. And suddenly the mind closes the file. That's just who they are. It feels like we've learned something about the person. But if you step back for a second, what we actually learned was something about a moment in time, and those two things are not the same. For a long time, I used to treat those moments as something bigger than they really were. If a conversation went poorly with someone, I would take that as a key defining moment about that person, as if that interaction somehow captured something permanent about them, like the moment told me everything I needed to know. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized that assumption is built on very little information. Most of the time, we have no idea what someone else has going on in their life in that moment. We don't know what kind of day they're having. We don't know what they walked into the room carrying. We don't know what kind of pressure they're under, what kind of stress they're dealing with, or what happened 5 minutes before we saw them. And yet we take one small window of time and turn it into something permanent. That's a pretty heavy conclusion to draw from such a small amount of information. What changed this for me wasn't some big philosophy or some big realization. It was much simpler than that. I had a conversation with someone that didn't go particularly well. It was nothing dramatic, just one of those moments where the interaction didn't land right. Normally, that would have been enough for me to carry some kind of assumption forward about the person. But the next day, something different happened. The next day, the person was willing to do the exact same thing I was willing to do. To move on. The moment from the day before didn't carry forward. It didn't define the interaction the next time we saw each other. Yesterday was yesterday. And honestly, I wasn't expecting that. That moment made me realize something I hadn't really considered before. Sometimes people are willing to let a moment stay exactly where it happened, in the past. And when that happens, something interesting becomes possible. You get to see a different side of the person. Not the version that existed in that one moment, but the version that shows up today. Since then, I've seen two different outcomes from this. There was one person who showed me a better side of themselves after something like that. The moment passed, the tension disappeared, and the interaction the next time was completely different. And there was another person who simply continued not talking to me, which, surprisingly, doesn't bother me at all. Because the way I see it now is pretty simple. Common ground exists if both people are willing to step onto it. But it's not my job to drag someone there. They know where it's found. If they want to meet there, they can. If they don't, that's their choice. And once I understood that, something else changed. I stopped playing in that court entirely. The moment stopped taking up space in my mind. Before that shift, situations like that would sit in the background. You replay the moment, think about what was said. You think about what the other person meant. You carry it around. But once I stopped treating the moment as something permanent, it simply stopped occupying any mental space. I didn't think about it anymore. And what's interesting is that the thing I thought I was protecting before was my peace. When we free someone inside a bad moment, it often feels like we're doing it to protect ourselves, like we're setting a boundary, like we're deciding who someone is so we don't have to deal with uncertainty. But what I've started to realize is that sometimes that thing that actually protects your peace is much simpler. You let yesterday be yesterday. You let today be today. You allow the possibility that a moment might just be a moment, not a permanent label, not a final conclusion, just something that happened in a specific point in time. And once you see that, you don't really need to carry the moment forward anymore. You don't need to hold it against someone. You don't need to assume it defines them. You simply allow the next interaction to show you something new, or not. Either way, you move forward. And sometimes that's all it takes. Not rewriting the past, not pretending the moment didn't happen, just allowing the possibility that the moment doesn't have to define everything that comes after it.